Hello and welcome to MTG Deck Tech. So Mythic Championship 7 begins tomorrow, and that's the best time for us to take a look at the metagame, how it shapes out, what we can infer from that and use in our own MTG Arena experience. So we see that the most popular deck is the Jeskai Fires deck, which is what was to be expected as we've seen it shape out more and more throughout the weeks. It plays Fires of Invention and the Cavalier of Flame mostly, also other Cavaliers, but yeah, it just tries to get these cards on the battlefield that have a lot of different difficult to play mana costs, because Fires gives you the ability to play 2 spells without playing their mana cost. You also have a lot of mana sinks, so cards with activated abilities, for example the Cavalier can pump itself and other creatures to be able to hit your opponent for a lot of damage fast. So of course Jeskai Fires is our best deck. Second best deck is Junt Sacrifice in the meta, I think, and we also see that a lot. This relies heavily on the Witch's Oven and the Cauldron Familiar, pinging your opponent, getting the cat back, stuff like that. You also have some other sacrifice outlets, for example the Core Vault that can grow very big. I've talked a bit about this deck. I'm not a fan playing it myself, but I think it's very strong. You also have stuff that works a bit off this concept. For example, Rector's Sacrifice is mostly the same, but with a little less food synergy. You don't have the Trail of Crumbs that of course can give you the card advantage in the green version. You have the Golgari Sacrifice without the red part. So mostly you have variations of this Junt Sacrifice dominate the meta right now. Golgari Adventure is another deck that can be played still. I have played around with it some. You have the Edgewall Innkeeper that of course can draw you cards whenever you play a creature that has an adventure spell on it, and you just play a lot of great adventure creatures. So this is still a thing. I thought this might go away with Veil of Summer getting out of the meta and counterspells coming back, but this seems to be not the case. You do have some decks that rely heavily on counterspells. For example, Is It Flash that does some direct damage to your opponent and also has these counterspells. Simic Flash that basically has the counterspells and also gives you some creatures you can attack with. And yeah, and also Azorius Control, of course, can't forget about that, which gives you some tokens, which gives you good planeswalkers, for example the Teferi, or yeah, mostly the Teferi, and you can win by playing those type of counter spells. Yeah, so we also see some Temur Reclamation still in the meta, which yeah shouldn't perform that great with all the Teferis running around, but we'll have to see about that. Of course, Temur Reclamations relies on Wilderness Reclamation and Expansion Explosion, making a lot of mana, hitting your opponent to the face. It also has some counterspells available, so it's also in this counterspell type of meta. Yeah, the only other deck we really have is Simic Ramp, which is not that many decks. So we do have some rogue decks. We only have one deck that plays the Embercleave, so this is why I will call this video a death of aggro. So it might be that aggro is dead for now in this current format. I will look at some other tournaments in the end of the video. You can look forward to that. But yeah, as it looks, we don't have that many aggro decks, or we only have really one aggro deck, the Gruul Adventures deck that has been played. So we'll see how that performs, if it can shake up this metagame. When we look at the cards that have been played, we see that green is still the most important color. We have 254 forests out of these 67 deck lists, so that's a lot of forests, a lot of trees there. We also have some blue going in and some black going in, also a bit of red, and so this is mostly what we see in the cards or the decks we have looked at. We do have a lot of Mystical Disputes going around, which is the kind of replacement for Veil of Summer, because we don't have Veil of Summer to protect ourselves against counterspells. We do have the Mystical Disputes, mostly in the sideboards, because Mystical Dispute can counter a blue spell for only 1 mana if your opponent can't pay 3 mana. So it's a very nice card to play against these counterspell decks. I also play it a lot, which is mostly why I'm playing blue right now, because I hate the counterspells. You all know that. We do have a lot of casualties of war, which I didn't expect, but then again, it is a very powerful removal that can remove multiple things, which might be really, really good in this type of meta where you have enchantments going around with the Fires of Invention, for example. You have artifacts going around with the Witch's Oven, for example, or mostly the Witch's Oven, maybe some Great Henges in the decks. I haven't looked that closely. You play a bit of Duress to get rid of some Planeswalkers, some enchantments, of course. Bone Crusher Giant is still a very nice card to do some direct damage to your opponent and still have a creature. Lovestruck Beast, a very nice creature that can give you some board presence with being a 5/5. Of course, we have talked about the Witch's Oven Cauldron Familiar combo, which we see 76 of the Cauldron and 80 of the Witch's Oven. I'll have to look which deck doesn't play both of them at a 4. This seems to be the obvious choice to me to play both 4 times. But I'll have to watch out what kind of deck does that. We have the Gilded Dews, of course, which can make you food, which can give you the mana advantage. Still a very nice card, and especially with green being so powerful. So Paradise Druid, another mana dork. Teferi Time Raveler, I spoke about this. It's very nice against these flash decks. It's also very nice against anything really that plays counter spells. And also against the Temur Reclamation, because it can only cast Expansion Explosion in the instant speed if it wants to do a lot of damage. Murderous Rider is still, I think, the best removal in the format. It gives you a creature afterwards, so it's a murder, or a better murder, because it also kills Planeswalkers. Murderous Rider is just a nice card. We've talked a lot about it. Also Brazen Borrow, because you can bounce stuff, you get a creature. Ether Gust is still a thing because of the green decks running around. There we see the fires. Trail of Crumbs, we have a little less than we have sacrifice decks, because not every sacrifice decks play these types of food synergies, but I think it's very nice in combination with the Cauldron Familiar, because it can, every time the Cauldron Familiar comes back and sacrifices a food, it can draw you another card. So that's a nice thing. Cavalier of Flames, rounding out the top 30 played cards as the finisher for the Fires of Invention decks. I talked about it a lot also. And those are the cards being played. So we see there's not many aggro decks running around, only the one. And this is also what we see in the general metagame. I have MTG Goldfish again here that has a sort of snapshot on what decks won the tournaments in the last few weeks. And we see the Jeskai Fires being dominating, but if you count all the sacrifices deck together, you really have the domination of the sacrifice archetype. So the Jund Food, Golgari Food, Rakdos Aristocrats, we already talked about those 3 decks. You also have some Golgari Adventures, some Azorius Control, Temur Reclamation, whole flash decks, even some mono blue. So mostly the things we talked about. And you see, you do have some aggro in other tournaments. You have the Rakdos Knights with the Embercleave and the Rotting Regisaur going in for a lot of damage together. We also have the mono red aggro with stuff like the Torbran or the Bone Crusher Giant. But mostly aggro seems to be dead right now in Standard. So I don't know what I'm going to do in my arena experience, because I do like to play some aggro. And I might be going to the historic format where Gruul aggro seems to be a very nice deck. But I'll have to see about that. Until then, I think this was enough to give you like sort of a snapshot on the meta, what you can expect from the Mythic Championship. If I have to put my money on it, this is a really tough one, what's gonna win. Of course, you have a lot of luck factor, but I do think the Jeskai Fires deck is the best deck in the format right now, so I'm banking on this winning. I could also see some Jund Sacrifice coming through very nice in the format. Temur Reclamation I don't think will perform too well. You have the free challengers playing this. We'll have to see about that. Yeah, this is basically what I think is going to happen. I don't think the flash decks will be that great because we do have a lot of mystical disputes running around and also stuff like the Teferi. So I'll have to see. We'll all have to see, but I think this is how this tournament will shake out. I might be doing an analysis after the tournament, but until then, this was MTG Deck Tech with the preview of the Mythic Championship 7.